I used to be ashamed of my past and unsure if I'd make it to where I was going. But I knew one thing was for certain. We don't end up where we're going on accident. I've also learned that we can't erase the past or hide from it, but we can learn from it and pass it on to others. So who am I? I'm the definition of a bootstrap girl. Someone who's made the hard choices to pick themselves back up and make something of themselves. And I'm not the only one. My name is Danisha. I'm a mom, a wife, a professor, advocate, queen of my own path, who's overcome abuse, foster care, homelessness, and raising 5 siblings on my own at the age of 24. And eventually I got a PhD. But something that I learned is that I don't know everything. So here on my show, we're going to be bringing in people who know the things that we don't know. Let's get in and learn on the Dr. Danisha Keating Show.
The countdowns are my favorite. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Dr. Danisha Keating Show. I am so excited to have my friend Kathleen on today. We are going to be talking about a hot topic within the community of advocacy. A lot of people call it the hero complex. Some people call it being a martyr or trying to sound like a martyr. I have been literally told that I had tried being the hero of my siblings and I should have let someone else step in instead of trying to just become a hero, like having a hero complex. So we want to really talk about this because I think it is starting to be, instead of it being what it was intended for, to say like, hey, you're not the hero in anybody's story, you just need to help come alongside them and be their community. It's now turned into this very negative, like anytime someone tries to help, it's, oh, you're trying to come out as the good guy. So I want to hand it over to Kathleen. Like, what you have been experiencing this and have been having these conversations with people that you talk to. What has that situation been like? Fill us in, give us some stuff, and we're just going to dig in.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. I feel like this is a safe space, which is good. Sometimes
Good.
Instagram does not always feel like a safe space.
No, it doesn't. No.
No, but I think it's so important that we continue to show up there and continue
Yes.
to show up online in these spaces so that we can share all of our lived experiences. And so I think one thing
Yes.
that I stepped into unknowingly at first, like, I mean, a long time ago, and when I was still, my home was still open and we were just fostering our kiddos in the early season of that, I know that I made mistakes. Like I said things I shouldn't have said. And I mean, at the time too, I was processing stuff in real time. Like I was like, this is my life. Like, you know what I mean? So
Yes.
I think it's just a very like fraught topic in general, like foster care and
Right.
adoption. And whether you're a foster parent or you're a former foster youth or you're a birth parent or you're a kinship carer, like there's just so much emotion and so much like heat kind of wrapped up in it all. And I think sometimes online it's easy to forget that there is a human on the other side of that and that their experience, though you may not understand it coming from where you're coming from, their experience is valid as well. So there was someone who I posted like a reel a little while back, and I think a woman came on and said, this comment section reeks of like a savior complex. Like you guys need to check yourself. Like, and I believe she's a former foster youth or an adoptee or maybe both. And um, I want to hear what people are saying who have a different lived experience than me, and I always
Right.
try to champion that you know
Right.
but I feel like it's just hard because I'm like, so you're saying that we're not allowed as foster parents to say sometimes this journey is really heavy and hard. Like I
Yeah.
imagine perhaps being a former foster youth, you know what I mean? Like, so I think there's hard and heavy to every person's experience, and it just struck me that why is it okay to say, why does my experience or their experience as foster parents come off as a martyr complex when all I'm really doing is just taking up space as a human and saying, hey, these are emotions I'm feeling around my foster care journey today.
I think one of the things, and I wrote this down because I was like, I want to make sure, like, I'm literally taking notes because, like, my brain works too fast. And so, and then when I try to explain something, it's like, da, 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 and I'm like, that did not get explained at all because my brain jumped around. But I think you brought it up. You're like, okay, I'm living in this currently right now, and it is hard. And this is what I think that we forget is that when we say this is hard, people are assuming that we are saying the foster youth is hard, that they're a burden. And this is literally in every political conversation right now. And I'm not going to go into the particular topic I was talking on, but I literally looked at my husband last night and I was like, this person is literally blaming the foster youth and saying we as a foster youth is the burden when it was never us as the child who was a burden. So then what we do is we take that conversation in a heavier topic and we say, oh, this foster parent is complaining about a situation. It's like, no, there is this thing called life, and life is freaking hard. And then you add other dynamics to the situation. At no point that I have heard from your account or from you that you are saying this foster youth is hard. You're saying foster care, the system that weighs down from us being actually able to love well and be able to be there for a bio family, to really do what we are wanting to do to change the system. That is what's hard. And the poor foster youth are getting caught in the middle. And maybe the person on the other side of that comment felt and has been told or felt that they were the issue, or that you were saying, well, that foster youth was hard. It's like, no, what you're saying is life freaking sucks sometimes, and this situation's really hard. And I think what we do is the danger is that we start to walk on eggshell with every single conversation. And now nobody knows what is right to say or wrong to say, and we don't get to have real conversations. We're just yelling at each other. And as I was a former foster youth, and I told my husband this morning, I was like, I used to hate foster parents. I used to hate caseworkers. I thought they were all evil because I had experienced very bad people. But then like social media got involved. Like I started sharing my story 3 years ago, and I started getting to connect with foster youth and caseworkers. And I was like, there's a lot of good ones out here. Oh my God, like you're in this not for yourself. You're not trying to be like, oh, look, I'm the hero. We've seen that from some foster parents where they're like, if it wasn't for me, this child would never. And I'm like, bye-bye. Like walk away from that person.
Pass. Good day.
But you see like a room full of people be like, who? Oh God, like who are you? But then there's parents, foster parents, bio parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles saying, hey, this situation is really hard because when I try to advocate for food, I get blocked. When I've tried to advocate for clothes, I get yelled at. Our file gets dismissed. I'm being threatened that the kid is going to be removed from my home, and I don't know what to do. And so when you're saying like, hey, foster care is hard, you're not looking at it and saying, well, this child, but then you do add trauma into the situation and behavior that is resulted from trauma, and it makes the situation harder because it's already a hard situation. And really, if we can't be honest, what's the point of like speaking up? And then that's where we see burnout happening with foster parents. So it's like we cannot keep having our community attack each other the way that we are. Like if someone is really having this hero complex, like we need to get them out. But if someone is speaking up and just saying like, hey, foster care is hard, but you don't have to burn out. Here's how you don't burn out. That actually saves 15, 20 foster parents from walking out the door saying, I'm not doing this anymore. So
exactly.
It's so much. And literally my brain is like jumping through 1,000 things. So let's back up a little bit and walk me through like how can a foster parent safely share if they don't have a place to share without being attacked like that? Because if you're going to keep attacking me, I'm going to be the one who's going to be like, peace out, I'm done. Like I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not opening my life for it to be attacked.
That's exactly. It's very hard. I think like for me, I just learned along the way, like I always come back to my why. Like, why am I sharing anything on social media? Like, why? Like, why? It's so much easier just to not have to deal with the trolls and people who are, well-meaning, but are just being kind of mean,
Yeah.
And I'm like, the reason that I do is because
I was like literally like, why do I have this? Why do I do this to myself?
Like literally why?
Why?
And it's because like, I think we do prospective foster parents a huge disservice if we aren't honest about like some of the hard things. We also need to talk about the joys of it. I just posted today about how it's not all hard and heavy. It's so joyful. And so like your heart expands and you just love so big. And it's like, it brings so much to your family and to your life. But I just think the more honest conversations people can have about it, the more prepared they'll be to actually enter into it.
So tell me, okay, walk me through. I think this is where people lose it because they don't understand. This is really where we're doing a disservice. Why? What is the mentality of a foster parent first coming in, or a prospective foster parent? What is that mentality, and why is the honesty so important?
That's such a good question. I think for me, I look back at my own journey and it wasn't, I didn't know any foster parents. I was the only person that I knew that was doing this. And still today, like in my local community, I maybe know one or two other people that have done foster care, have participated in it in some way. And so to me, the most helpful thing was being able to have conversations, honest conversations with people. So I had like one or maybe two honest conversations. And that's why I even started my podcast. I'm like, I want people to be able to hear all the different possibilities
Right.
that exist in foster care so that you can know you don't have to feel blindsided. You don't have to feel like, wow, I didn't expect it to be this hard. Like it's it's hard, but it's something that
Yeah.
is so that doesn't mean that it's not, and again, it's not that the kids are hard. That was
Right.
one thing
It's
that
a
I did point out to that
system.
woman. I was like, please do not hear me say that like it's the system, 1000% the system, and it's that way. It's difficult for so many reasons that are like feel out of our control.
Dig a little bit into it. Like what was the perspective like before, not even having someone to talk to you, but like really what, when you have talked to someone who's like, I'm going to be in foster care, what is their mentality? Like share with us about like what you
Yeah,
have seen, the perspective, why, like what did that look like? Because what I see is from the movies where it's just like, this is going to go so great, they're going to love me, and they're going to fit right in with my family, and Christmas is going to be so fun. And what have you seen that like in real time? Because I think people don't understand that
yeah,
that they're just like, this is why we're being real and honest, is like, look, it's hard because people are coming in with this like washed version of what they think it's going to be, where it's like it's going to be so
yeah.
beautiful, and a kid's going to come in and they're going to be like, oh, thank you so much. And it's not that. But what in your, what you've seen, like how has someone come in and then been like, oh my god, this is not what I imagined it to be? What was that
Yeah, I
before and
mean,
after like for us?
1000%. For myself, as well as so many of the foster mamas that I work with, they are coming in with that. I mean, many of them come in with like all they did is their classes and they've seen like, oh, what's that Mark Wahlberg movie? Like, oh,
Oh, oh
Instant
my god.
Family,
Instant
like
family. Okay, so
Instant
that
Family. I'm
that's
like,
the image.
that's
Yes.
great, but that's the image. And so like, and I'm like, okay, that's a great movie. It's fun, but like, it's not. And I feel like too, also, so many people outside of the world of foster care, they don't know how to respond when a person that they knows starts fostering. So for example,
Right.
people will be like, congratulations when your foster child arrives. And you're like, ooh, whoa, that is not, we don't congratulate when a child, comes into our home through foster care. Like that's not, you know what I mean?
Right.
But they don't know what to say. They don't know how to handle it. Like, so I think that's part of it too, is that your network that exists before you
Yes.
have a foster child in your
They
home
need to be
is,
educated. So, okay, let's talk
yes,
about the
yes.
instant movie or instant family movie, because that one kind of pissed me off, but also was kind of like a little bit more real about it. That was like the first
Yeah.
one I've really seen. So in this movie, they basically, the foster parents come in, they're all sitting at a circle, and they're like, we're so excited, and it's going to be so beautiful. We're going to get this healthy little baby, and we're going to get this teenager, and they're going to play sports, and we're going to get rich, and da 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 da, like, because they're playing sports. But their other kids, we're going to become a whole family again, and like how we're a family for the first time. And then as the movie progresses, you start to see like foster parents drop out. You start to see there's the main character, Mark Wahlberg's character, is like, it's all perfect over here, nothing bad's happening, and everyone is laughing because it's like, hold on, because you haven't had a disruption yet. You haven't had, this is the honeymoon phase where they're on their best behavior, but it's not even the kids that was the heartbreak for them. They were like, okay, we understand that's going to be the hard part. There's a dynamic shift in the movie when the parent isn't able to do what the parent says they're going to do, and they watch the daughter's heart like shift of like, but my mom said she was going to do this. And
Mm.
that's when you see the real shift happen for them to be like, oh, this isn't a puppy. This isn't getting a
Yeah.
puppy. This isn't, once the puppy's potty trained, they're going to be good. This is
Yeah.
real people, real situations where they're ripped from their families because something is happening, and we're standing in the middle, and we are a stranger to them.
Mhm.
And I was put in foster care. I had taken my siblings, even me being the sibling to them, it was hard because it was, you're not my parent. I still had the same conversations where I'm like, look, I got flipped beds, cussed out, flipped off fingers, stolen wallets. Like, I got all that. That's nothing. But the heartbreak was when in those conversations where it was like, why was I not good enough for my parent to get it together? Or with friends who have entered into foster care, it was like, why did my family member lie about what my parents did not ever do, and then we got taken away anyway? Like, those are the conversations that we see that most people don't see. And if we do go with this lens of it's going to be perfectly fine, everything's going to work out, and we're not educated in that, we're going to make worse mistakes. And we're going to be like, well, I'm going to ground you. And it's like, first, probably not going to work, but, but you're not a parent. And I think the biggest issue I always see with foster parents, the conversation that they're kind of like, I didn't even think about that, is they're like, I'm mom and this is dad. And it's like, you're not mom and dad.
Yeah.
You are strangers, and
Yeah.
they have a mom and dad. So that's where they're like, I didn't know that was going to trigger an emotion. I didn't know that even, like, say one of the siblings who's younger calls you mom or dad by accident, the older one's going to have emotions about that. And that's why it's so important to be honest. It's and there's a difference, and I want to say this. There is a difference between being honest and giving too much information. And we see that happening too much. And that is where a lot of foster parents are like, we need to advocate to stop doing, where it's, here's my child's health issues, here's my child's mental inability to do XYZ, here's their behavioral issue, all over social media. Every time they're in a conversation with someone, here's what happened to them. Like, this is why so many foster parents are like, it's not just the, hey, being a foster parent is hard. It is also the, hey, we need to stop oversharing, because you're not doing a good service for your foster youth. So this is where I've seen you guys do a lot of advocacy that has changed how I even advocate my own story to foster youth, because it doesn't help anybody when you walk into a room and everybody knows that person's stuff and they never gave permission for it to be exposed. So what would you want to share? Like, what else is on your heart? Like, what can we do to support foster parents better? How, what are some things that we can encourage foster youth parents and foster youth with? What do you got for me?
If you see something, on social media or wherever, just know, first and foremost, there is a person there who has a heart and who has, like, probably has good intentions. And I think, like, even someone who comments like something has good intentions. Like, we're all coming in with our baggage, but and me as well, So I think just first and foremost is believing the best of each other. And my bigger thing too is, like, if I take, like, a step back and look at a more macro level of, like, what a more macro view of, like, what's going on with, like, the foster care triad, we call, like, former foster youth, adoptees, birth parents, and foster parents, that, like, we we're all just human beings. Like, we are. And so, and all of our lived experience is valid. That doesn't mean that we as foster parents shouldn't listen to birth
Right.
parents' experience and former
That
foster youth.
part.
We need to
That
listen to each
part.
other. It's so
Yes.
hard. It's so important. And I think too, like, of the three parts of that triad, I would say 99% of the time, if not 100% of the time, foster parents are the, like, most privileged party in that, right? Like, no one's taken my kid away, and I'm not a youth in care. So
Okay.
I'm the one sitting
That's,
there with, like,
yeah.
so I can understand how it would be difficult for someone on the other two sides of the triad to see me posting something saying, like, "Oh, it's really hard. This is hard today," or heavy. And again, not about the kids, but about the system, the courts, whatever. And be like, you think it's hard for you? Like, it's really hard for me. Like, it's harder for me. And of course it is. Like, of course it is.
Yeah.
I think
I
it's just
think we need
important
to
to,
stop using the word privilege, though, because it's been so
yeah,
convoluted over the last decade that it's kind of the same as just being like, I don't know, there's just this word, that word is I think it's being overused for everything, and it's not
yeah,
actually what it is that it's not that a foster parent is more privileged than anybody else, but they're not the ones as directly impacted by the CPS's decisions. So if
totally. Yes.
that's where it's they can be where, I have heard horror stories where it's like the foster parent had the kids removed because the license, like, didn't have something about it. And so it's like, oh no, but it doesn't, unless there's a built relationship with the child over time, it doesn't impact them as much as it would the foster youth. So it's more of just like, where's the impacting happening more?
Yeah.
And that's not a privilege for anybody in the square or the triad or the triangle or whatever you
Yes.
want to call it. It's just, it's a
Whatever shape
reality,
it
is
is.
that it doesn't impact the CPS worker as much. It doesn't impact the foster parent as
Mhm.
much as it does the bio family and the foster youth themselves. And so
Totally.
I think what we've done is we've literally been like, well, you're just trying to be the hero. And it's like, no, I'm just trying to step in the gap. And so
Mhm.
if you are someone who wants to foster, you're not going to be the hero. Like the
Yes.
hero
Right.
doesn't exist in this situation, but we are all deciding to step in a gap that is desperately needed to be held, so that way we can say, okay, I want, my goal as a foster parent isn't to adopt this child. My goal of the
Yep.
foster parent is to say my hope and my goal is to reunify you two together,
Yeah.
to be the person who just stands in but holds both hands and say, like, I'm part of
Mm-hmm.
this team. You don't know me, but I hope that we do know each other eventually. But I love the stories where we're honoring the bio parent. The bio parent
Mm-hmm.
is working really, really hard. We don't know why their kid ended up in foster care, but what we do know is that there's something that needs to be fixed. And that foster parent coming alongside of them, not just while they're fostering, but after, when they're reunified, and
Mm-hmm.
then they're like, oh, that was my foster parent, they helped my kid, and like they took in my kid for a little bit. And I think that when we understand that that is the goal of foster care, that happens. But what we can't do is just say reunification at all cost.
Mm-hmm.
Family, there's a lot there. I think it jumps around between, depending on the state, but overall in the US, it's like 60 to 65% minimum is due to neglect, if not more. I've seen all the way up to 80% where it's due to neglect. And people are like, oh, that means you didn't want your kid. It's like, no, 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 no. Neglect can consist of leaving the children at home so that the parent could go work because they didn't have family around, not being able to afford food, not being able to afford to keep the lights on, and that not just being a one-time thing, that being over a span of time, where it's like, it doesn't matter how many resources you have and stuff like that, you just are not making it, and your child is going with a lot without. It's also clothes. It's not, again, it's not just one of these things, it's a multitude of all of these things. And then that's when it's like, okay, you haven't been able to do what you're supposed to do. So now this is no longer safe here. It's not happening here. The child is in active danger. We're going to remove them and we're going to put them in care. This is where it's like, okay, now let's put them together as a foster parent, saying my goal is to help keep the triangle together, and I'm a
Yeah.
temporary piece, should be temporary piece. But that sometimes doesn't happen. And I've heard of horror stories of foster youth saying, like, oh, my foster parent would tell me all the time they were going to adopt me, and they actively blocked help from my parents. And so there is
Wow.
this does happen, but that's not every foster parent. And that's where I
Mm-hmm.
think I had such a disdain for foster parents for so long, because it was like I was hearing all the horror stories and you didn't get to hear a lot of the beautiful stories where it's like, hey, this foster parent stepped in to help this mom who was struggling, or this dad who was struggling, and then help them get like the car seats, and like, okay, when the kids went over, they didn't pack, like they literally gave all the clothes that they had for this kid, all the toys, the bedroom set up, like they were just like, oh, you need it here. And I'm like, okay, that stuff's not cheap. And they're like, I don't care. That's not why I do this. I do this to be the stand-in, temporary
Mm-hmm.
stand-in. But that, I think we lose that when we don't talk about the real. And it's the same thing. We talk about the hard when it's like, hey, going and getting your degree is not going to be easy. It's not this picture perfect thing of I'm going to go in 4 years, get it done, and like nothing bad's going to happen. It's like, no, you might go and flop on your face. And we're not sharing that to be like, to discourage people or to talk bad about people, but it is to bring a reality that this is not going to be picture perfect. But it also, we can't keep attacking everybody in the community over everything when that stuff isn't as serious. You sharing that
Mm-hmm.
you had a hard day should not send someone reeling because it was like, hey, today was hard. Again, it wasn't the foster youth, it was just a hard freaking day. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of appointments and a lot of other stuff that takes place that people really don't know until you see it. And I didn't see this until I had my siblings. And I sat there so many times where I was like, this is why people quit. I would be in CPS rooms where I had to have an appointment with them, and there would be a grandparent or an aunt, an uncle, a stranger dropping kids off and saying, I can't do this anymore, and leaving. And I like wept. I was like, oh my God, like, how do you just do that? And they're like, I just can't. And I at first judged, but then being in it for a little bit, I was like, oh, this is freaking hard. And it was never my siblings that made it hard. It was the life situations that made it
Yep.
difficult. And I have had to tell my siblings that a lot. I'm like, it was never you. it was just the added stress from what was happening with the system when they would say that I was getting resources and then getting denied. When I had a full day of going, taking you guys to school, then going to work, then coming back and doing homework, and then having to deal with CPS when they came at my door because they come unannounced. Though that stressed me out because it was like, did I do something wrong? I don't think I did. And I'd go through a mental checklist. But you do get PTSD from people being invasive to your life. And it's like, that's what I've opened myself up to as a foster parent, is that, but you don't understand the weight of it until you're in it. And you're still dealing with other things of life, like health issues, mental health, physical disabilities, things like that. Like we know people who do that. So it's like, how do we encourage people like, hey, and I guess it comes at the risk of losing people to follow or getting attacked in a comment, but just how do we bridge the gap for people to say like, hey, we're allowed to talk about these things without bashing, without blaming, and how do we recreate an environment that is, we're able to say, you know what, this is freaking hard, without it coming across as we have to over explain why it's hard.
Yeah, that's such a good question. And it's something that I've had to learn along the way. But I really think like now I'm in a place where, if someone comments something that feels like heated or angry or like that, again, first try to see them as a human. Where are they coming from? But I also do think that like I used to be like, oh, you're coming for me? I'm gonna block you. Like, you know what I mean? And I'm like, no, okay, stop. Like, stop.
There's
If it's
something else
if it's like
happening.
if it's obscene or like whatever, then honey, you're gonna get blocked. Like if it's just like rude or mean or you're throwing F bombs around, like bye bye. But if it's a person saying like this is what it sounds like to me and this is why I feel that way, then I'm gonna say, okay, let's leave that right there and let's engage. And that's first. I think the thing we can do as content creators, as people with lived experience in different parts of this foster care journey, is to say, you know, I'm not perfect and but I want to enter a conversation with you about this. And I'm not here to prove myself right. I'm here to have model for my followers and the people in my community that we can have a dialogue about these things. And it's important to do that as long as we're respectful. And I think like we can even be really mad and still be respectful. And I think that this person was like, I didn't delete anything that she said.
I think it's super important that the whole piece that you just said, that is super important, because there are moments too where it's so funny because people are like, don't preach at me, Danisha. I'm like, I'm not trying to. And I've always said like, I'm not preaching at you, but I can understand how someone else is going to read what you said and twist it to this. So I'm adding this on. So I've even said like, hey, I just want to add for clarity for people reading. This is not what this person is saying. They're saying this, or let's have more of a dialogue, because what really that does turn into is we see it all the time with people start attacking each other and we're like, whoa, what just happened? Like that's how reels go viral. It's kind of like,
I know. Oh, I hate that so much. I'm like, why can't they go viral for like,
I was like, can I go viral for something good instead of like, I went viral on a video because I misspelled something and people were like, so much for having a PhD. And I was like,
You're like, thanks for adding to my comment section.
I literally said, I was like, that's what you're going to come at me for, is a misspelling. You're not going to come at the situation of what someone did wrong. Like that's our focus, is that? And I have a mouth, and my husband's always like, we have a 2-year-old, come on. And I was like, I know, I'm trying here. I had teenagers before, so that's also my fault, because we're just like blah blah blah, and my family just, that's what we do. But it is so important to remember that it's not just, and this is what why I say stuff is, it is not about the person commenting some of the time. And I heard from Gary Vee, he's all like, if someone's choosing to attack you on social media, it says a lot about where they're at, not about who they are, but where they're at. If they're going out on the internet, like I was like, preach, Gary, preach. But he's like, if they're going out of there, think about it. They're searching the internet daily to go attack someone. How sad is that? Like, he goes, I feel for that person who feels like that is the only conversation they're gonna have today. It makes me sad. And I was like, I never thought about it that way. I was always like, oh well, look, they must be miserable. It's like, no, they are literally internally miserable as a person, not just in their life. Like they just feel like that's the only conversation that they can go have, is with some stranger on the internet that they attack. But then we have the opposite side where we are watching someone, and let me tell you, there are people who will never comment on something that I post, but they will sit there and heart comments. And I'm like, so people are reading without ever responding. And it breaks my heart when someone says something and it's like, hey, that's not what happened here. Like then that's why I always try to provide a little bit more clarity, is if I could see how someone would take it the opposite way, I'm like, whoa, bring it back. Like, and then there's moments when they're just off the handle where they're just attacking, that I've deleted it, because I'm like, there's nothing productive about this comment. And literally you guys are calling each other names, you're insulting each other, you're threatening to do some stuff. And I'm just like, that's not what we're going to do here. So when it comes to like what the goal is of posting, you said it, like, it's to help like bring awareness to it. So if someone was wanting another foster parent to share, like, how do you determine what to share and what not to share? Mm. Hmm. They might look you up to see. Yep. Yeah. 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 But also, here's the crazy part that I don't think people understand, is that if you Google somebody's name, you could see their social media posts. So if you literally Google my name and put in like sibling or parent or something like that, posts will show up. And my my husband looked up the other day and it was like trending. I was like, what? Like, the top search for my name was parent. Like, that was the top search. And he was like, Danisha. And I was like, oh. Oh my god, like, people are trying to find out who they are. That's kind of funny. Good luck, like, not hiding it, but it's just hilarious that people go to that extent. And so it's like, I have heard parents say, or like strangers say, like, oh, they're not going to find it, it's going to be so far down there, it's like 6 years ago. It's like, it is always footprinted on the internet. Like, you guys can delete it, but it is so easy to find it that all you have to do is Google it. That's it. My account's private, doesn't matter, guys. But also think, mm, mm, yeah, it's a cycle. Yes. You're you're being honest, but also, like, I think, and this is something that we don't talk about in the system, like out in the community, is what you post can be used against you. People screenshot things, you guys. Like, that's what's so wildly crazy to me, is that people think it's just like, oh, it's fine, nothing's gonna happen. I'm like, I had CPS watching my social media while I had my siblings, and I didn't tell anybody that, but they were like, oh, we saw that you posted this, where were the kids? And I was like, my stuff was on private. My stuff was on private at that point. And it was someone screenshotted it and sent it in and said that I had left them alone for a week, which was not true. It was a summer vacation and they were at my sister's house and I went on a work travel, and someone had screenshotted that I was on a work, and it was a family member, and they reported it. And so when I got back, they purposely showed me this and I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea who reported it. I would thought I was amongst all family and friends, but someone felt the need to say that I had literally got up and abandoned them. So it was wild to me that that happened. And I'm like, y'all, my stuff was private. Like, you are not amongst friends and family when you share. Like, there is always one person in your life, even when you don't know it, that would be the person to turn against you. Like, just live that way, post that way, and understand that like, you don't need to overshare. You don't need to share why, like, what your kid is experiencing. I should not know every medical issue that they have due to their abuse. Like, that is not okay. And my little sister, and I've said this so many times, but my little sister used to tell me, because when we were talking about a lot of the stuff that we were going through, and I was writing my first book, my siblings were chiming in because I wanted to know, like, how far should I, like, when should I stop? And my sister's like, look, I just want to say this, like, if I walk into a room, I don't want people to know things about me that I never told them. And I was like, ooh, so there's a lot scrapped off the table. And I was okay with that, because what it actually did was I started telling my story in a way where it was like, I don't need to go into the nitty ditty gross details of my story. I don't need to overexpose that. And honestly, like, it feels weird when you do go into a room and someone's like, oh, I know what happened to you, and it was this in this detail. Like, it feels gross. So why post it? It doesn't actually help us to post it. But what we can do is we can focus on a situation and say, like, what can we learn from the situation to be better? And that's where I see a lot of foster parents doing that, where it's more of like, hey, this situation is hard. It's hard when they get up in the morning and the whole day, like, they're having big emotions, and I don't know what to do outside of just be there and be someone cheering them on. And like, today was just rough because we're all tired. Like, that's not a bad thing to say, but we've made it this shameful thing to talk about. And then we see this massive burnout and people not wanting to get into the foster care system to help. And they've literally said, like, well, this movie that I watched one time, it painted it that it was going to be this horrible thing and I was going to get murdered. And I'm like, oh my God, no. Like, y'all, we got to find a happy medium here. Like, for all the holy things, like, Jesus help us. But it's so frustrating. It's just frustrating all across the board, because it's like, if we say anything, we're kind of, it's like that damned if you do, damned if you don't. You say something, someone's mad. You don't say something, someone's mad. And again, it's the right information being shared that we're attacking, not the wrong information. That's what I think baffles me. Like, and I mean, we're in a political season. Again, we're always in a political season. We're just in an election year, and that came out. And if I don't post everything I voted for, people are like, well, I can't follow you. And I'm like, then bye. Like, that's not what my social media is for. Like, I literally had someone coming at me this morning. Like, I'm like, look, that is not what my social media is for. That's not what my advocacy is for. My goal of posting is to be someone in the community saying we have a group of people to love and to love on. And it doesn't matter if I prefer Pepsi to Dr. Pepper. And it also doesn't matter if I voted for one thing in my state versus another thing. Like, that has nothing to do with my advocacy. But if you are going to sit here and tell me that you won't follow me because of it, then you need to go, because you need to go find your own environments. And I'm going to keep loving the people that are in front of me. But we can't live in this society of eggshell walking, because then we don't get to talk about the real issue. And that, I think that's what bothers me so much, is that we're so caught up on, well, you can't use foster youth as a term anymore. You need to use lived experienced person. We can't use this term anymore, foster parent. We need to use stand-in parent. We can't use, or resource parent is the new thing. If you use those terms, you're offensive. And it's like, guys, can we actually get to the root of the issue of why foster care is happening here? Like, how about we talk about that? Like, how about we talk about how the mom who just tried to go get food couldn't freaking swipe her card because whatever happened? Like, how about we talk about that instead? Let's make real change, not a term. And that, I think that's what gets me so much with social media, is like, we've literally, like, everything is offensive. And I'm just like, look, I'm tired. Like, I feel so tired as an advocate right now. And that, I don't know what to do about that. And people are like, get off social media. I'm like, I run my business from social media. I cannot. You're welcome. Yeah. So yeah. That's true. That's true. Intent and perception are different. Well, I think we need to get to the understanding as, like, what was offensive about it. That's really the question I come down to, is what was offensive. And really what I have been told is, Danisha, it's the fact that you shared about it at all. That's what's offensive. And it's like, I'm not going to stop advocating for people who are scrolling at midnight going, am I the only one? I'm not. Because if I stop posting and sharing, like, hey guys, like, as a former foster youth, these are the imposter syndromes you're going to get. You're going to feel, when you hit rejection, you're going to feel like it's you as a whole person. So do you have anything else you want to add before we end? Thanks. I feel like I don't have wisdom. I'm like, my wisdom is a little shooty. No, just kidding. Well, thank you so much for joining. And again, if anybody's listening, this is not that we're, I'm actually kind of glad that people are seeing this, because this is a conversation that is hard to have, because there's so many perceptions and opinions. But we need to get back down to the reason that we're sharing is to help bring awareness, to say we're in this together and you're not alone. That is the only reason why we're sharing. We're not sharing just to post it on the internet and be like, look how sad it is for me. We're posting to be like, you are not alone, and guess what? You have a community of people here, and we're willing to help each other, versus just be like, yeah, have fun. So if you guys need to reach out, we're both available. We want to be able to talk to you guys and just encourage you, if whatever stage you're in, and have the hard conversations, so that way we're actually able to make movement in the foster care system. Have a wonderful day, you guys.